I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
Welcome to Snake Envy. So, a topic I see on social media pretty frequently is removing stuck shed. If you're like me, I don't deal with it very often. Do you?
I deal with it quite a bit.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
With the volume of snakes you have, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to give some tips for maybe 2 or 3 different ways to get it off. First off, why does a shed stick?
Sometimes that shed doesn't come off fully, and then the oils dry up. They kind of evaporate or dry up, however you want to break that down. But it's just dry, and then it sticks, and so you're gonna need something to. I use moisture, like this moisture hide here. Not hide, sorry, moisture box. I use moisture hides too. Like, I do them a lot so I don't have to do this.
Yeah. It's really 2 separate things. We've talked about it before. There's the process of shedding that moisture doesn't really do anything for because the snake is producing those natural oils from inside anyway. But once it's stuck, moisture is the way to loosen
the key.
And so it's really 2 separate things, but if you have a humid hide in the enclosure, the snake may be able to work off that stuck shed by itself.
Yeah, and it gives them something to rub on.
Yeah, and it's full of moss and it's a tight space, and so they may get it off all by themselves. And that actually brings me to if you catch a stuck shed soon, before the oil dries, just peel it off.
Yeah, if you get it within a day or so.
Yeah, you're not going to hurt the snake at all. And you may be able to just peel it off with very little effort. The other thing I do sometimes, since I don't use humid hides, is I'll kind of replicate that a little bit. I'll mist the snake a couple times a day, and then just moving around in the enclosure, tunneling in the substrate. Sometimes they'll get it off on their own. And I'll usually try that for a couple days. If it's a lot of shed. If it's just a small piece, you can pick the snake up, mist that small spot really good, kind of get the moisture in, and you'll probably be able to slide it off. But let's talk about a box. I call them hot boxes. You do a version of this without the towel. And do you worry about the temperature of the water, or is it okay if it's just room temp for you?
I usually do room temp.
Room temp. And so basically you're just replacing the snake's tub with a tub with a little bit of water.
Yeah. Depending on the size, sometimes an inch or 2.
Yeah.
And I'll just let them sit there for a few hours
while
I'm working here. And then I can get to them at the end of cleaning or whatever I'm doing. And then get that shed, work with them a little bit and peel it off.
Yeah. What I've found is that if you warm the water, if you use warm water, so I usually aim for, more than 90 degree water. And some people would say, oh my gosh, 90 degrees, that's way too hot. But you got to remember, as soon as the water goes in, it's starting to cool.
Immediately.
Immediately. So you're losing probably a couple degrees every few minutes. Now, I put a towel in the box, and we'll show you a close-up of this box. With the warm water, it basically just clouds up. It's super humid and warm in there. I call it a spa day. But it only takes an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And the reason I put the towel in, some snakes there's only about an inch of water, and then a soaked hot towel so that the towel just doesn't absorb all the water. You soak the towel in the hot water first, then put about an inch, depending on the size of the snake, an inch or 2 of warm water. The towel gives the snake the option to get out of the water if it prefers. Some of them will just sit on top of the towel, and that's fine. It's super humid in there. It's super warm. But if the snake wants to get down in there and crawl through the towel or try to hide in the towel, then the towel is going to do a lot of the work for you. It's basically going to provide friction and be pulling the shed off while the snake is exploring inside the towel. So that's the reason for the towel and the reason for the warm water. The warm water, in my experience, versus room temperature, this will take an hour for most situations.
What I like about the towel in there is they can roam through there and cruise and just rub and
Yep.
and they can work it off themselves.
Exactly. A lot of times you'll pull that towel off and shed all over it. Colubrids, honestly, I don't deal with stuck sheds a ton. My green tree pythons and boas have thinner skin than colubrids, and it's much easier for their skin to tear when they shed. So it's actually pretty common for them to have problem sheds. But he's 11 years old. He doesn't shed a ton, but of the 3 or 4 times he sheds a year, probably one of them he needs some help with, whether it's just a single piece I can peel off or whether he needs to go into the box. But if he goes into the box, again, an hour, maybe 90 minutes. By that time, the water is pretty close to room temp.
Yeah.
But it's the shed literally just, and in fact, as you're letting the snake back in the enclosure, if you just kind of let the snake go through your hands, the shed just peels away. It just loosens it to nothing. So,
And why getting the shed off is important is it can cause problems, like especially eye caps that can mess with their vision and it potentially damage your eye if it goes on too long. And
Yeah.
I've had it, I've seen it where just at the tip of the tail and it's never peeled off, and that will actually restrict that tail when the snakes are constantly growing. I've seen they lose like a quarter inch of their tip of their tail.
yeah.
I've seen ugly things like that.
Yeah, a small piece of shed in the middle part of the body. Like if you don't notice it or you don't see it for a while, it's typically not going to do any harm. But yeah, the tail tips, eye caps definitely can be a problem.
Face.
The reason that I was reminded to maybe talk about this topic, in addition to seeing it on social media, my gopher snake had one stuck eye cap last week.
Oh.
And initially, I just sprayed her eye a couple times a day for 2 days, and she likes to tunnel and do all that. Figured it'd probably come off on its own, but after a couple days of doing that, it didn't. So I hotboxed her for an hour, and I wet my thumb, and literally it just slid right off. And for those that haven't dealt with eye caps before, they're actually a lot thicker than
they can be.
They can be hard to get off.
Yeah.
And the hotbox broke that right down, and it slid off.
Yeah, because when they're in this. They can rub their face right on that towel, and it's got a rough surface.
Yeah, even on the sides.
Yeah,
she had probably loosened it, but as soon as I got her out, wet my thumb, and it just slid off really easy. So 3 good methods you can use. I think this one maybe is a little quicker, and maybe it does some of the work for you if the snake wants to crawl around in the towel. They don't all. Some of them just sit up on top of it. And
I haven't tried this, but I'm liking this idea. I usually I do soaking. I'll do moisture boxes, which is just a tub inside.
Yep.
Inside the enclosure, the moisture hide. I wish I could do it with all my snakes because they just like to hang out in there and hide in there. Especially out here in the West where you got drier climate.
Super dry.
They sometimes want that humid.
I think they just like them too because they're it's a tighter space than hides typically are because it's filled with moss.
They like to cram in.
I think they like them, without a doubt. And like you say, if there's a stuck piece of shed, they may get it off on their own before you ever notice.
Typically do.
Yep. So feel free to comment if you've got a method that works great with you. I think the key to the methods we're talking about is they're not really invasive. You're not having to hold the snake. And, I've heard of some people using mineral oil and castor oil and things like that. Not only is it a mess, but you literally have to hold the snake the whole time you're doing it and really get it soaked in there good and then try to... These are very unobtrusive. The snake just basically hangs out in here for an hour, or whether it's room temperature or whether it's warm. The work is all done without even having to touch it. So, But feel free to comment if you've got a method that works really well, particularly eye caps. Those are sometimes the hardest things to get off, but the hot box does a great job with those. Thank you.
Thanks.